All right. Well, thank you for coming, everybody. So today we're gonna do a workshop on assessment, and I don't think anybody was here for the review and assessment workshop that we did back in February. But one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to really provide our tutors with strategies and techniques to be able to, use review to create your own assessments and then measure the progress that your learner is making. And then, so that's one of the things that we covered in the last workshop that we did. And then today Cathy's going to talk about more about assessment, and then she's going to give some ideas and some strategies that I think are going to be really great in terms of how to break down a specific lesson plan with an idea of daily life experiences, and then to be able to assess the progress based on that, which I think is something. Conversation, right. And then, the goal clearly is conversation, to be able to get our learners to the point where they can go out into the world and do basic things. It's interesting because just this week, after I had the conversation with Cathy putting this together, I had a learner who came in and she took a test. She wants a tutor, and she told me that she's trying to be more independent, and so she tried to go to the bank because she wanted to go get a debit card. And so she memorized the vocab and the things she had to say, and then she went to the bank and she completely froze, and she just didn't, she didn't have anything to say.
Nobody spoke Spanish at the bank?
I'm sure she got through somehow, and then I had a tutor that came in and talked about how she was working with our learner about, ordering a coffee, going into the coffee shop and ordering a coffee. And so they worked on it, and they talked about what she had to say, and then she went and she didn't do a great job the first time. And then they kept working on it, and then the second time that they went, she did a much better job. So this is, these are people that just told me about this stuff this week, which I think is very interesting. But this is sort of along the lines of what Cathy's going to talk about today. As always, we tape our workshops, so hopefully more of our tutors will have access to this. I think this is such a good workshop that I want to do it again sometime in September, just to offer it to more people. But so I'm just going to let Cathy.
You post it?
Yeah, we're going to post it on our YouTube channel, as we always do, so you can always refer back to it. And so I'm going to let Cathy take over now.
Okay. So we're going to have a conversation now.
Okay.
The focus today is not going to be the methodology of teaching. It's basically going to be how are we using the results of assessment to drive our instruction to the point where we are basically looking at targeted assessments for lessons that will be effective, as opposed to having a lesson in isolation. We're going to focus everything on conversation. So I'm just going to start with that proviso. I want to start by asking you, in many of these sessions I hear people say, I don't know how I can gauge progress in my students. I just don't know. And this is a question that we're going to keep asking. Here's some of the questions they ask. How do we know that our lessons are actually having an impact? What evidence will demonstrate what they actually understand? And how can we design effective lessons to meet the needs of our students? These are some of the questions. And then finally, what do we want our students to come away with? We're not in the classroom. We're not in a specific school system where they have protocols, where they have assessments already built in to the curriculum. We have to do everything ourselves. We have to design the assessments. We have to design the lessons. We use the materials offered by LitNet but we're doing it all. So we really have to create the whole package. So, what do we want our students to come away with? What is the evidence of progress in the work that we're doing? So I'm gonna lay it out to you. What do you want to see your students ending up with? And finally, I mean, what would show progress in the work that you're doing? What is the essential evidence of progress in the work we do?
You're asking what's
I'm asking you.
Well, I think it would be great if Heidi can talk a little bit to her boss at work, if she can talk a little bit to her son's teacher at school, if she can speak a little English when she goes to the store to buy stuff,
Okay.
to the bank,
Okay, fair enough.
stuff like that.
Okay, what about you? What would be progress for you?
I've been working with my learner who wants to teach children in her evangelical faith. There's, I don't remember the name of but it's something about teaching kids, and she has to be able to learn enough English to do it. So I got her to tell me, figure out in English with me the words that she wanted to teach children. So there's like 4 sentences. And she's had a hard time just memorizing those sentences, which are,
Right.
but that's one of the things that I've done most recently with her. And, and she'll want to glance at her notes and we'll joke about it. But, and then I'm trying to go from those words into a broader thing. One of the things that she's learning to say is, God loves you, you are very important to him. So we went into what's important to you, who is important to you, and taking it from there. So that has felt
Like progress in
positive.
that. And her goal is basically to use the language for a particular job, for a particular role in her life.
Eventually, she's pretty far from that.
So, okay, but that's, again, it's a conversation that leads to
Yes.
something. Okay. And what about you?
I think, as you may have heard earlier, I've had some communication problems with my learner lately. And I think progress to me would be for him to say, I feel like I'm making progress. Because I know he must be, he works in an environment where he's one of 2 Spanish speakers, and everyone else is an English speaker, and they really like him very much there. And I know he's picking it up and he's learning, but we haven't been able to dig down and really see how that's happening. And he always feels like he has to rush, he has to get better because he has to get into a program in the fall, and so I think if I guess that would be, if he could say, okay, and he has actually said, I had a good experience this last week, I will tell you about it. Those
Is
kinds
he a
of things.
beginner, by the way, or intermediate?
I'd say a high beginner.
Oh, so he's going toward intermediate.
Yeah.
I should have asked, is everyone here with a beginner or
I have an intermediate.
you have an intermediate?
And he's, he struggles
Okay.
a lot, but he's also, he wants to work very hard, but he has a very complicated life right now. Family life and things going on, so it's hard.
Okay. All right. What about, so yes, more language, your student.
Yeah, my student has more language, so I started with the grammar, and I said, this is not the way to go, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
And so-
Correct.
right.
Yeah, I started there too.
Glad you
Be
realized that.
memorizing, give
Okay.
me back.
Okay.
So I have this newspaper called Easy to Read or something. I've got its title, the name of the newspaper. It's for people like us to help teach them how to read and then to get the essence of it. And that's what I'm trying to get. She can read fairly well. Words that she can't read, I say, write it down, we'll get a definition for them, explain that. But then I wanted to get the essence of it because she'll need to talk that, speak that language. And so that's what we're focusing on right now. Various paragraphs. She'll write the paragraph or she'll read the paragraph. And then I'll ask her, what do you get out of it? What does it mean? What's your feeling about it? What's ideas that you have? And that's what I'm working on to help her be able to verbalize these thoughts.
So easy English news.
English news.
English
Yeah.
news, so you're getting her to
Easy,
talk.
maybe
It
easy.
was brought up in one of the other tutors.
Yeah,
so.
very good, very good.
Yeah.
Topics,
yeah.
current topics.
Current topics,
Yeah.
and that would generate conversation. That's what you're
Absolutely.
hoping will generate. So progress for you would be that the conversation would come out of the reading.
Right.
But what I'm hearing from all of you is conversation is going to be the bottom line. Getting them to speak. And I'm going to give you an example now of what happened in the workshop previously. One of our tutors, Jeannie, she gave an example of something that really struck with me. She said, I was in a school taking French for 3 years. I did really well. She said, I passed all of my courses. And at the end of 3 years, I couldn't speak French. And this is what is going to open what I'm going to be talking about. Because she couldn't speak French. Because all of the work that she did in the schools, and this is what I've seen throughout my career, in the schools, so much drill skill without connecting it to the application of the conversation. So in today's session, that's what we're going to work with. Progress equals conversation. Wherever that conversation comes from, your teaching style is based on you. You have to develop the teaching. You're not going to be doing methodology today. That's another workshop. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to move on to the actual agenda, which will be formative assessment. How do we gauge progress with assessments that we can create for our students? The standardized test is really not going to be helpful to us. Why? I think you know why. Because it's too vague. It places students in categories, but we really don't know what they know and what they don't know. It doesn't tell us very much. Now, I think the standardized test, they'll tell me, when they come in, it's a standardized test, right?
Yeah,
It tells a level.
Yeah, yeah, I think ballpark, it lets us know what level of fluency we can.
Right. But it really doesn't tell you much about what they've learned, where they're going, and how to organize your lessons. So we're going to concentrate on what's called formative assessment. This is the assessment during the lesson. Okay? So during the lesson, you are going to create assessments. At least 3 points in your lesson. We're going to create an assessment. In the beginning of a lesson, this is activating prior knowledge. The student then can go back and you're going to hear what they remembered from previous lessons. Okay, that's your first assessment. The second is in the middle of the lesson. And that's an assessment where whatever you taught during the lesson, you're going to check on them. And you're going to see if they know how to do it. You're going to have them, you're checking in. And then at the end of the lesson, that's the gestalt, where at the end, now this is what they came away with. So in each lesson, these 3 points of assessment are check-ins for you to see, well, where do I go next? This will drive instruction, because now it will tell you where you need to go your next lesson. It's almost a way to create your own curriculum, because it's really, you don't have a curriculum. You're doing it all on your own. So in the next slide.
At the end, are you talking about reviewing what you did that day?
Right.
But, okay.
It's as they're learning. Formative
Okay.
assessment is discovering what they know while they're learning in your lesson. So
Okay.
with all of your examples, first you want to know what they learned in the previous lesson. Did they remember it? What did they remember? So right off the bat, you know, well, they didn't remember this, but they remembered that. I mean, so you know where they are. In the middle of the lesson, and again, there are many different types of assessments to do that. Did they get what you taught them in the lesson? Did they understand? And then at the end of the lesson, what did they come away with? what can you say for the next lesson? What did they really understand? So hopefully at the end of each lesson, there will be a chance for a conversation as a way to put what you're teaching together in a conversation, or in a way that they can speak English. Okay, so that's very important. So formative assessment, so what are the benefits? In formative assessment, it makes the learning visible to the students. You can gauge progress. You can see and give them feedback right away. And they can see what they've gotten and what they still need to do to go forward. Finally, you can then make decisions about your next lesson, where you need to go. So immediately you've got an assessment system during the lesson itself. Okay? Everyone with me on this? Okay. So it makes learning visible. Now, in a balanced system of assessment, you are going to establish a goal. And the goal is a conversation. Okay? Whenever you see the word goal here, it's conversation. So you're going to establish that conversation, the intended learning outcome. Then, once you've established the conversation, which could be going to the bank and opening a checking account. Mm-hmm. The conversation might be, in your case, considering you have an intermediate, it probably would be explaining what they learned from the reading passage. Key points, because you want to be specific. You want them to be specific. In your case, it might be, what you just mentioned, a conversation. I forgot what you said.
Talking to our son's teacher.
Right. And the evangelical teaching, whatever came out of that, can they then have at the end of the lesson a little conversation around that? Or you could develop one, which we're going to go into in a minute. So then you can create your assessments. They could be benchmarks, they can be tasks, projects. That's something that you're going to have to create for the student. You can create quizzes, and finally your daily assessment, which is beginning, middle, and end of a lesson. So you have what's called a balanced system of formative assessment. Each one of these tells you where the student is and where they need to go, which is what you need. So, yes, any question?
Is that printable?
I have it.
We'll give it to you. We have copies for you.
Or I can print it out at home.
Yeah, we made copies.
Oh, okay.
So we'll give
Okay,
you
you
some.
all
Okay.
have this copy.
Okay.
Okay.
So, the next slide, yeah.
So we're getting copies of all this whole lecture?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Oh,
So when you have a goal, which is a conversation, be as specific as possible, be as clear as possible for the student. That's very important. If the student is going to the bank and the conversation is bank, is it a checking account they're opening? Is the conversation about a discrepancy in their balance? Be as clear and specific as possible. In the evangelical lecture, is she talking about, what is she talking about? What is, be very specific. And in all of these, specificity is important. And then the real key piece is, what are the lessons that need to be developed in order for them to have this conversation? So this is your part. What lessons are you going to create to target your instruction to the conversation? So this is the key piece here. How are you targeting your lessons to the conversation? So we're going to keep moving in that direction. So now you're designing, that's the next goal. You're designing formative assessments. You're identifying the goal, you're getting teaching activities and the learning to reach the goal, and you're then checking for understanding. So here's an example. Marcy. Okay. Marcy gave an example. Did you go to that? Okay, this was a great example.
Okay.
Her student wanted to know how to order a latte at Starbucks.
Oh.
Okay, so
Not so easy.
immediately she first decided what does the student know already about the language for ordering lattes? And she used the KWL for that.
Yeah.
Then what other language did she need? And then the lessons that go with it. So she worked backwards, and here are the lessons. The student had to learn how to order the latte, the vocabulary for the different types of coffee. These are the lessons. Then prices. She had to know how to say different prices, and on and on. Perhaps some syntactical structure, some grammatical lessons, but focused on ordering a latte. Okay, so that's the key piece. Then she practiced with her student, and they recorded it, and then she could see and evaluate and check what did the student retain from the conversation, what still needs to happen, and she then has the next lessons in place. Okay, so we're going to, next slide, we're going to think about this, okay? So this is a method for designing a conversation. All right. First, you come up with your goal. What's the conversation? You can work with a student on this. They can tell you what they want. You give them a role. You're the audience, so you have a role. Then you think about the standard or criteria or lessons that are required to have that conversation. You have to develop that. You have to think about, well, what lessons would get her to have this conversation? And then the product is a recording of the conversation. In that recording, you can hear, did she or he? What does she still need? So there's a lot of practice. Review lessons are critical for this, because right off the bat, she's not going to have the conversation right away. This has to be practiced. It has to be gone over and over. So I'm going to show you a sample of this. Now, does this seem doable with what you're talking about? I'm wondering about your student. Because what do you expect from his analysis of the reading?
I expect her to tell me on one level what she remembers from reading it, and two, what she thinks the most important part of that paragraph was or is, and then I'll gauge her in a conversation about that if I can.
And what would the conversation look like? What do you mean by conversation? See, then it gets more difficult because you're talking about someone who has language.
Right.
So this is different than going and getting conversation for a latte or for, it's a little bit different. What do you expect out of that conversation?
To have her come up with words that she never used before, maybe, perhaps language, with particular vocabulary words, and assess whether does she have ideas about what we just read, about going to the beach. The article this past month was about beaches and going to beaches in riptides and be careful and all that. And so I'm saying, you have children, right? Are you aware of these rules? Are you going to teach the children these rules? What are you going to tell them?
So in other words, you would ask and prompt her with questions.
Yes.
So the question prompts might be, so something you have to think about in terms of what you expect from the conversation, because it's a little bit different than the kinds of conversations we're talking about here. This would be more of a cognitive leap.
Right.
Yeah, because here they're talking about actually memorizing and using the language for a specific purpose, for survival, for being confident, more confident about speaking English, especially in this environment now. And the beginner is really going to be faced with that. So, all right, so here is my sample. This was my learning outcome. My student wanted to know how to cancel an appointment. Not with me, but she could use it with me. I would have to teach her transference. But canceling an appointment at the doctor or the dentist.
Right.
So her role is, she's a patient calling the receptionist. I'm the receptionist. The lessons that are required, I had to come up with those lessons. and I have a recording of her. I use my phone, my iPad, or my computer to record the conversation. All right? So, here's what I came up with. Maybe you can add some more. What will the student need to reach this goal? First, I felt that she needed to know the introduction on the phone call. Hello, my name is. I also was thinking of the anticipated assumption I had to make of the receptionist. The receptionist usually would say, "What's your date of birth? What's your insurance?"
Right.
She has to understand that. So I fit that into the lesson. She also has to know lessons for numbers, dates, and times because she has to reschedule. And for beginners, these are challenges. We assume that, they know it, but they have to know this in English. Phrases like, I had an appointment on the so-and-so date. She has to be able to state the issue. And then the reason for the call, I will not to because, and I would like to reschedule for, here we go, date and time. And the anticipated response of me, the receptionist, might be, well, we have an availability on this date, but not on this, I have to be able to think of my response in teaching her this phrase. Otherwise, she's not going to understand what I'm saying. And then the phrases for ending the conversation. Thank you, whatever. And a practice role play. When we practice, this is the definitive assessment, what I meant by an essential assessment. This is it. This is the bottom line. Can she have this conversation? And we keep practicing it, doing it the next lesson. In the beginning of the lesson, let's go over our canceling of the appointment, and we go over it and over it.
That's a tough one, that's tougher than the latte.
It's tougher than the
It's a
latte.
little tougher than that.
It's a little tougher, yeah, well, she wanted to
Well,
know this.
Yeah.
Well, may or may
Milk,
not.
soy milk,
Do
Right.
you
skim milk.
see any other lessons I could have included? Remember, I came up with this. There's no curriculum here, I had to come up with it. Do you see any other lessons I could have included here for her, for this?
You mean add it on?
Yeah, any other lessons? I thought I included, but
Thank you for your help.
exactly. Another way to end it. Ellie, if you use Ellie always ends with dialogues, most of the time. And they give options for beginnings and endings. So here's a good example. Thank you for your help is another option. And they give a bunch of them that you might be able to use. So I was thinking of another lesson I might include, which would have been maybe some tenses. I will not be, I would like to, maybe a lesson in tense if you want to do grammar, but the grammar is focused on the conversation.
Okay.
It's not a list of isolated sentences where they get lost in whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Redundancy and stagnation. And this is where a lot of teachers feel, oh, we keep doing these, but where is it going?
Right.
Here it's going somewhere. It's
Mhm.
focused. So this is sort of the model. And then after listening to the recording, I can check for mistakes, omissions, misconceptions, and give her immediate feedback. So we have to work on maybe your explanation for why you're not coming. We have to work on whatever needs to be done. So, want to give it a shot? Let's try it. Come up with a goal, a conversation for your student. Give them a role. You're the audience, so who are you going to be? We're not going to do the role play. We're just going to see just the design of it and what lessons might you come up with, some lessons, and maybe we can brainstorm for the rest of them. So come up with it. It'll give you about 5 minutes. We can do
What
it.
to write down?
Yeah, write down what goal would you want your student? Conversation.
Here, I'll go back to this
Yeah.
so that you can.
Right. This is it's called grasp.
Yeah.
Right, if you're finished, or you're still working on yours?
No, I think
You got an idea? You got an idea in yours? Okay. All right, so who would like to volunteer? Should we start?
We'll go around this way now.
All right,
Oh,
okay.
So, I thought about going to the the laundry of the dry cleaners
Okay.
and saying, I want my clothes cleaned. I would like to have my pants with cuffs, made with cuffs. How much will it cost? When will you be ready and do you deliver it? When it will it be ready, my clothing, and what are the charges, and do you deliver? And thank you for your help.
Okay, so first of all, the goal is what? The goal is for him to have a conversation with
The dry
cleaner,
cleaner.
the dry cleaner. So, okay, so he is going to the dry cleaner.
Cleaning laundry.
And who are
pants.
you?
I'm the dry cleaner.
Okay.
Not bad.
Okay. Okay, so what are some of the lessons that you would want him to have to get to this goal? So that's what you're thinking of now, are lessons.
Well, to have the conversation that it goes smoothly, that he gets what he wants, or she wants, that she understands what the response is. I can't do that, I can't do that, it'll cost $5 too much, and have that kind of dialogue with the,
So in other words, you want to teach him some vocabulary for
Yeah.
the cleaner.
Yes.
So that's one lesson that you would have to have, is the
Right.
vocabulary of cleaning, right off the bat.
absolutely.
Anything else? Do you want to chime in? We can brainstorm what other kinds of lessons he might use for this.
For the dry cleaner, when will it be ready?
Mhm.
Did you say that?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did, okay.
Do you deliver?
That's all right, but then you could do a lesson on question words, like when, why, where,
Yeah, all those
Yeah.
W's.
Right, all the
Exactly,
W's.
exactly. So in other words, your lesson then, there's a lot of questions in that dialogue, in that conversation. So you could have lessons on questioning.
And
Anything
also
else?
say, if you want to point out a spot on something,
Mm.
you know, I don't go to dry cleaners much anymore, but when I did, it was like, this has a grease spot, please,
Right.
you know,
Mhm.
take care of it, or something like that.
Can this fabric, will this
Mhm.
ruin the garment?
Right, right. This dry cleaning, what does it do? Does it help clean, or does it make it more difficult to clean?
So, okay, so that's questioning. Then you have the actual conversation itself, back and forth.
Right.
The anticipated responses of the cleaner. What might the cleaner be saying to him?
We don't do that.
Okay. Any other kinds of,
Well, pricing,
Good.
and
You need
delivery,
lessons on-
and when will you be home? And when will you be home at work? It's just, you gotta.
so you'd have lessons on pricing, definitely on cost.
Right.
And that was one of the things that, in fact, in Marcy's example, she had to know the price of the lattes.
Right.
It included the vocabulary of the lattes, of course.
Mhm.
The beginning and ending of the conversation, the beginning, how it actually started, and then the endings, okay? Right.
So I think, like, in a way, like, if, you have, like, you started with the end, so, like, the conversation. And I think that what you wanna do is then break it apart, so you're, like, working backwards almost.
Right.
So, like, the first thing would be, your first lesson would probably be the vocabulary,
Right.
Then your second lesson would be the question words, and then you start generating the questions
Right,
and
got
the
it.
answers, so that in the end, you can
Have a product.
exactly have that conversation.
That's the real piece, it's the
Yeah.
layering of this.
Yeah.
That you have to come up with otherwise, you have the full conversation.
Absolutely.
You want to actually begin with the lesson itself,
Right.
the lessons that are broken down.
Mhm.
So, the vocabulary might be the first thing you would be concerned with.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so we have this, okay, this is one part. Now, yours, the cop, I love it.
Well, I didn't get quite as far. I guess the goal or the circumstance would be my student gets pulled over by a policeman, and he doesn't know why. It's not like he
Mm-hmm.
purposely just ran through that red light because he thought he could do it, or he's going 70, he doesn't know. Which I think was the case when he did get pulled over. I'm not sure. I think it was a light out or something, but I don't remember the details. So the role would be that he needs to respond to the officer. Probably he would be answering, usually they say, are you aware that you were going 45 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour zone, or that you ran through that light, or that you have a broken tail light? These are all that's a vocabulary lesson right there, to think of all the things that you could get stopped for.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So, in other words, he is the person who's being stopped.
Yes.
That's his role.
Right.
Who are you?
I would be the cop.
You're the cop.
I would be the cop.
Okay,
And
there
I'd
it is.
say,
Yeah.
All right.
I'd pick one of those things.
Exactly.
I'd say. And I think, a little bit of this is also advising a little bit on how you converse with police, and I think he's really well aware of this. But
I think
sometimes,
that's a good idea. Some conversation that you can have about.
yes, I mean, to
conversing
say
with-
yes sir or yes ma'am if it's a female. I think he, because he's still not, very highly skilled in English, sometimes he thinks it comes out kind of crudely or not with the best politeness or something. So I think also not to go overboard, but just to say with good judgment, no, I was not aware that you don't have to go, thank you for pointing it out to me, but you can say, no, I was not aware. And I guess, sort of counseling him not to argue too much with the policeman, but to also to sort of know what all of those issues are. And as an aside, he had a very hard time getting his license. When he did get stopped, he had a license from Colombia, and the cop finally just said, get a Massachusetts license. So he finally did, but it took him 3 months.
So what would
to get it.
another lesson be regarding licenses? What would another
Well,
lesson?
he has the license now.
Mhm.
I mean, the other thing is, I guess this is what everybody does, is where do you keep your license, and how do you, license and registration, to talk about, maybe even to tell them, I'll get my license and registration, I'll show you, usually they ask for it.
You could tell them where the office is to go to get your license.
Oh, he's done the license already.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if he hadn't.
Yeah, if he hadn't, that's true. And he was-
then
I mean,
explain it.
he's resourceful. He'll look that up and find out how to do it. But I think his, especially spontaneous interaction is where he gets,
Yeah.
So in other
Right,
words,
so-
That's it.
Yeah, go ahead.
but I'm just saying, so you might want to have lessons on the kinds of questions that the policeman might ask him.
yeah, that's
And
true.
those lessons are going to be critical for, in other words, he would have to learn that kind of response.
Right, and the more English he can say comfortably, I think what he tells me he reverts to a lot in his work, when like a client asks a question, instead of, and I guess to some extent I understand this, instead of saying, could you speak slowly, or I don't understand, he says, no English.
Well, yeah,
And,
well,
and then he
that's
goes
what
to
the
get somebody to
response is.
translate.
Right.
Right.
So, but he's at work and it's hard for him to do that, but so.
As you go through each lesson, remember that in the conversation, you're having a conversation with him. You're
Mhm.
recording that conversation.
Mhm.
So you have to remember that there are responses back and forth that you're going to be practicing in that conversation.
Mhm.
So each lesson is going to lead to more and more of that conversation.
Okay.
I don't know what you were going to say
Oh,
about.
well, yeah, I was gonna say that, you're moving towards sort of like the end result,
Uh-huh,
and so you need to move backwards.
okay,
So basically, we want our learners to be able to respond at specific life situations. So getting
Right.
stopped by a police officer is something that will happen to all of us at some point.
right,
So the question then is, that conversation needs to be had, but how do we break it backwards so that a person that doesn't know the language can get to that point, right?
Okay.
So you would break it down, you would move backwards, and so your first lesson could just be like, what are the many reasons people get
Okay.
stopped? And
Okay.
just teaching that. So like,
Mhm.
it could be, so this is vocabulary, so
Okay.
it's, you know, a broken tail light,
Mhm.
speeding,
Wrong turn, left turn.
wrong
whatever, U-turn
turn,
or whatever.
yeah, or, you know, going through a red light.
Yeah,
So that would be like your first lesson,
yeah,
and
I
having
see.
him learn those things,
I see.
right? And then after that, the next lesson would be, okay, like questions, responses
The
to
question.
this specific,
To the
so
question.
the police officer, the first question, say, what's the first thing the police says? License and registration.
Right.
And then what's the response to that, right?
Right, yeah, like in my example, what is the first thing that happens when you try to cancel an appointment?
Mhm.
So you have to think about what's the first thing he needs to answer.
Okay.
with the
License and
policeman.
registration,
Right.
yeah.
So you have to
Okay.
think of the anticipated question
Mhm.
that the policeman would ask
Okay,
and how he could respond to that.
okay.
Right.
So it's
Got it.
broken down that way. It's not the full conversation right away. It's
Mhm.
actually looking at each one of those,
I see.
working backward to look. So we really need a charting of all of the lessons. That might be a
Yeah,
really
so,
good way to
so
That's
what
interesting.
so
Yeah.
on the KWL, which is the know, what you wanna know, and what you learn,
Mm.
you could break, so for example, you know, your overall goal is how to navigate a conversation when you get stopped with a police officer. And then in the KWL, just for that lesson, you could just put down learning all the vocabulary for all the reasons that you get stopped.
Okay.
And then, like, you could ask them, like,
Yeah.
what do you
ask
think
him to
are
tell
some,
me.
what are some of the
He just took the
reasons?
driver test, so he should
Right,
know this.
right, like, what are some of the reasons you could get stopped? And so, you know, he'll tell you the reasons, and then you spend the rest of that lesson plan on teaching him all the other vocabulary for that, and that could just be one lesson.
A lot of it is vocabulary, it's true. A
Yeah.
lot of it is getting the
Yeah.
vocabulary down, especially in the syntax of that particular conversation.
Yeah,
It is,
yeah.
a lot of it is that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but a good start, so you have you know how to.
And then you could create like like you could create a lesson plan for every single reason you get stopped. You know what I mean?
And every single type of cop.
And every single game,
The
just,
friendly
you know.
cop,
A friendly
the
cop.
nasty cop.
Yeah, you could play the friendly cop, you could play
Yeah,
the mean
the friendly
cop,
cop,
you know.
exactly, you could do it at home.
Good cop, bad cop.
Oh, that's funny. Anyway,
maybe
okay,
I'll have
but-
him go buy some gum somewhere.
But you see where you need to go, and
Yes,
now
I do,
you're
yeah.
designing lessons from assessment.
Okay.
You're using assessment to design the lesson,
Mhm.
and it's the connection between the two.
Okay.
So let's go here, yes,
Okay.
starting yours.
So I went back to the school thing, so, the goal is for Heidi to, tell Dominic's daycare teacher that he's gonna miss a day next week, because he's going, as a doctor's appointment.
So he's also canceling his appointment?
Yes,
Okay,
or he's coming to school that day to
Okay.
take care.
so what are some lessons that would go with that? Again,
Okay.
work backward.
So, some of the lessons could be the days of the week, like next Thursday. so-
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Which is a good one for Heidi, she's very good at that. One could be, this week, last week, next week, you know, talking about those differences.
Right.
What else would- then she might, the teacher might, or she might also, when I ask the teacher, would that be a problem? But I don't know if that would be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that would be question words.
Question words, definitely.
okay.
This is daycare, right? So it's not a
Yeah.
homework situation
Right.
or
Right.
anything? Okay, yeah.
That's what I came up with.
Okay, and her opening, how would she open the conversation? That might be a.
She actually asked me this specific question once, but it's long ago. She would say, I guess she would say,
So she is the person who's canceling, and you are, who are you?
I'm the teacher,
You're the teacher.
yeah.
So you're going to then, you have to anticipate your responses to her
Right.
as well.
So I might say, oh, is Dominic not feeling well? Or, that's really a problem because we have a field trip next week.
Yeah, so that's more vocabulary, adjectives, feel, how people are feeling, so feelings, state of being,
Yeah,
like, physical state of beings, I mean, like, is it, because if she asks, is he not feeling well?
yeah.
That's like asking, like, how's he feeling physically, so like teaching her, he has a cold, or, just in case that, whatever the reason is. Maybe he has a cold and that's why he needs to go to the doctor,
Yeah.
But, so, like, that's good though, I mean, I think
Okay,
that's a good
that's the
breakdown.
kind of lessons, and you can actually, divide that into 3 or 4 lessons, and then have your actual conversation with her recorded, so you can hear how you have that interaction with her, and what the conversation's gonna look like when she actually does it. That's
So
the end goal.
would you do like several lessons before, well, I guess you would I would lay out the whole thing that we're
map.
doing, and then.
Right. Lay out the whole thing and see how you would divide it, and how, at the end of the lesson, what do you expect? Remember, that's the real bottom line. At the end of the lesson, what are they taking away? Can they, in fact, tell you something at the end of the lesson of what they learned? That's your 3rd checkpoint in a lesson. And then your next lesson is, what did they remember? Because we see our students once a week, correct?
Yeah.
That's just it. And then they go back and they speak in their native language.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're the only English exposure, or
Yeah.
they have very few English exposures. So that's really and we're talking here about beginners, so that's really basic. Okay, and then see the checkpoints and how that would look. Because we're gonna go to the last slide, which is now you're checking
Okay.
for misunderstandings, for omissions, seeing, and they also can hear themselves speak in the recording. That's an important part. Now you have the final piece, which is an actual goal that the student has. So, what would the conversation look like in yours?
Well, her daughter is going to be going into kindergarten in August. So, I got question words, like what will she need, what are her hours in school, who will drop her off and pick
Okay,
her
what
up.
is her role? She is what? She is the mother?
She is the mother.
And you?
I could be the teacher,
Okay.
yes.
She's having the conversation with you, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you are the audience, you are the person that she's having the conversation with. So what is she telling you? What is she trying to say?
She's trying to figure out the different pieces of getting her daughter to kindergarten.
Okay. So what would she start with? What are some of the lessons that you would give her for that?
Well, the questions about what does a 5-year-old need to go to kindergarten? Does
So she would be asking you, the teacher.
Yes,
Good.
yes.
So then that means you need vocabulary, for basic kindergarten materials, so
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
I don't know, lunchbox, I don't know what kindergarten kids need to be,
Yes.
finding out all the
Yeah.
vocabulary for that.
And you would have to answer her. So
Mhm.
your anticipated responses would be what she has to understand. So if she asks those questions, you better have those answers that she can understand.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a good one because it's like, there's a lot of questions and answers, there's a lot of questions. You could teach the question, the exclamation words, and then, to need,
Mhm.
the verb to need, I mean, you could spend a
Yes.
whole bunch of time on just that particular thing,
I can use that one, because my son is going into kindergarten too.
There you go.
Yeah, you should get together and work on that. But so before I give it to you, I just want to say that these I think these are such good ideas because our learners, their goal is to be able to communicate, and then we're always trying to figure out how we can help them communicate in everyday life situations. And so I think that, helping them figure out how to navigate through these basic conversations is just such a great way to impart on them like just basic communication skills. And then like seeing them get maybe a win when they're able to, I was able to get the coffee, or I was able to talk to the teacher, so these are real life like wins that they can get. And to understand that like in order to get them to that point, you're gonna have to go slowly and teach all these basic things before you get to, to the end result, so.
So this doesn't necessarily take place all in one lesson.
No.
One
No.
hour.
Not
No.
We're
at all.
talking about over
Exactly.
time.
Yes,
You're
yes.
doing
Down into different
a map
pieces.
of lessons.
Right.
We're doing
Yes.
a map of
Yeah.
lessons targeted toward the
Yeah.
conversation.
I think that's actually.
This avoids having to go to a book
Mm-hmm.
and looking at page number 4 and filling out the exercises on page number 4.
Yeah.
This avoids that. This is the way you can look at that book and say, my student needs to know dates, times. I'm going to look at that in the book and target it toward this
I
conversation.
see.
Right.
So that's the big picture of this. It's how you can create lessons so that these conversations are in fact happening,
Okay.
as opposed to filling out blanks
Mm-hmm.
on an exercise sheet in isolated lessons.
Right.
That's the piece we want. So to try to be as specific as possible and to think about your next lesson. It's like a roadmap of design. This is not methodology. You still have to come up with your creative teaching that's separate. But if you look at the final slide which is this.
Is this one?
No, next.
Okay.
Yes. So if after 4 or 5 of these lessons, or 6 lessons, you finally have the conversation with your student and you realize they're making the same mistake over and over and over again, what are you going to do? Well, here you have to be a little creative. Adjust your instruction. Maybe you need to add some teaching assists, maybe a video. Maybe you have to model the conversation yourself first, with being both roles. Include more review lessons, obviously. This is up to you. Use the materials in the LitNet. They have so many materials that might be useful for this. So that's a separate issue. That's your teaching style. And maybe some, there's a whole different learning styles. It's a very big topic in learning.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe your student is a visual learner, maybe he's an auditory learner, maybe he likes, so this is something that you have to try out, trial and error on that one. So.
And then I think that one of my biggest points that I always try to get across to our tutors is there's no hurry. Like, like you don't feel like they have to know this conversation and, don't worry about keeping going back. If they don't, just to give an example, if they don't know the days of the week, well then that's what you need to hammer on until they have the days of the week, and then you can move on. But
Well, that's true. The days of the week can be transferred. In other words, for mine, they have to know dates and times to reschedule. Well, she's going to have, these dates and times are going to go in many different conversations. So
Right.
I'm going to keep doing it
Yeah.
until she understands dates and times, because it's not going to be a one lesson.
I've changed the date just for that purpose.
You change the date.
Oh, yeah.
Thursday, is there, you got Thursday?
Exactly.
Right.
Change the date, that's it. So basically this is how assessment can be used in design. Because designing is a big piece of what we do. And if we're not designing in a way that is effective for them to learn the language, then stay in that, that's the problem. So maybe we could see success with those conversations, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's just a tiny little bit of a conversation, it's not, they're not going out there and having a fluid conversation, they're just doing a task, an everyday task that they will need to, and then, hopefully they'll be able to do that and they'll feel more confident about doing another one,
I know my student, I'm sorry, yeah, go
I
on.
think when it's just a small piece like that, that is not, not that hard to learn, it'll make the student feel more confident and
Exactly.
accomplished.
And that's exactly what I was gonna say. My student who, her responses are always 3 words. No can. I go. We go. 2 words. Now, when she had the conversation and we did this, she felt so happy. I mean, she did the canceling of the appointment. She was able to really feel confident. I understand, she said, I understand. But it's a slice of, she has a long way to go.
Thank you very much
You're
for this
welcome.
help.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, let's
actually,
pass
So,
out the
I just wanted to show you that in Ally, there is a specific, place that you can actually find, these everyday life conversations. I was looking at it today.
Ellie is great for that, life skill.
So I
Okay.
just wanna show
I
you,
use Elliot when I come across that.
Where is it?
I just wanna show you, I'm gonna show you what.
Okay.
That's great, Miguel, because it gives really good ideas.
I totally, so you go to materials, you go to lessons, and then, if you go down, let's see.
Further down.
Yeah.
Life
So
skills.
simple, super simple no, I'm sorry.
Real
Everyday dialogues,
good.
Where do you see that?
right down here.
On the left.
Oh,
So
Listen.
functional English,
Real
role
world leading.
plays, everyday dialogues. So like, so if you go to role plays,
Yeah, this is a role play.
yeah, I mean, basically what we're doing is role plays, but, teacher's notes, you got
All these
school,
areas.
transfer, health and body, so that it has all these different, different lessons. Let's see, let's go to school, I guess. So you got the tasks here, so,
Prepare a role play with a partner, perform it for your classmates.
yes,
Parent-teacher conference, that's good.
Parent-teacher conference.
Parent-teacher
Good name.
conference.
Yeah.
That's great.
Wow, this is
Yeah, he's got a first grader. Yeah, maybe we'll work on that too.
So you got, so this is for like,
Expressions.
probably for like an intermediate person, but again, like, these are all things that you can break down. You can break down all this stuff and, it's like if you're doing vocabulary, you gotta teach classroom, parent, you gotta
Vocabulary is a big part of it.
tutor, reading. I mean, those are all things that you could break that down and just start with that. But some of these have like specific vocabulary also that you can use.
You can select level.
You can select level,
Yeah.
so that one
Yeah.
was for like intermediate, but let's,
A beginner is, they have,
They have a pre-beginner.
pre-beginner would be good.
Yeah.
Dialogue for pre-beginner, but they have videos that show the actual conversation.
Oh, the videos are great.
Yeah, the videos
Yeah.
are really great.
Very helpful.
Where do you
so
find the
simple
videos?
questions for pre-beginners. So yeah, these are all great. So we're talking about, questions, where is it, what day is it, what color is it, what size is it,
Going over questions.
yeah. So,
May I
yeah, so there's a lot of different things here.
Home improvement, oh, that's intermediate.
Yeah.
Finding the restroom, that's basic.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Finding the restroom,
Yeah.
perfect.
Asking for help, yeah.
We did that one, asking
Well, that's
for
a little
help.
intermediate though, yeah.
handling a medical emergency.
I had a funny one with my learner who was asked at her work to find the emergency kit, and she didn't know where to find it. What it was. I put it in to translate, and it came out an emergency kitten.
Emergency kitten.
That's
Um, But yeah, so you know, you got Ally is a wonderful tool, and it's got a lot of really good stuff. So I would suggest if you don't have it, you know, but it's just it's
I use it all the time. I
yeah,
love
it's
it.
a resource. But you know, I mean, you know, it also just, I think this makes it easier for the tutor, because like, you know, all you have to do is just figure out what's the vocabulary for that specific sentence. That's not that difficult, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And they have an investment because they can identify more clearly in a role play.
Yeah.
They become that person. And I think it has some impact on the imagery of the actual learning in that regard.
Definitely, and I think that, like, you know, like for this woman that came in and said that she taught herself the vocabulary and stuff to go get the debit card, but she did it cold, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, so the practice that you'll have with your learner will help them, you know, build that confidence to go in and actually be able to,
Exactly.
you know, and even if they're not able to do it completely, they'll remember some
Yeah.
stuff about it and be able to navigate through
You
it.
know, my learner loves to use Google Translate to,
Well,
when he
that's
can't
become-
get to it, and I say, okay, that's fine,
But,
once you've done Google Translate and you see the English, say the English.
right,
Say it over and over and over.
right,
you know?
don't use it just
Don't
as a
just
crutch,
show
right.
somebody what the, you know, and then
Exactly.
forget about it. It's
Miguel, do you have the packets?
I do have the packets.
Yeah, we're gonna give you the actual version.
Thank you.
Yes.
What do you think about, I was thinking, I think after the last workshop, of maybe trying to have my learner just read something, even if she doesn't understand it, just to
Yeah.
practice
Reading?
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
from one of the books.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think that you can do everything, you know what I mean? I think that having her read a little bit is not gonna hurt, and it's definitely gonna help with pronunciation and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Reading children's books.
It would be great if
Yes.
she could
Yeah.
also
Right.
something
Right.
connected
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
conversation.
Right, yeah.
You know, if she could read something that would connect to the conversation, would
Yeah.
even, I
That's
think
true.
that would really be helpful, because then she sees the imagery again comes back
Right.
to what you were talking about.
Yeah,
So that might be even, you know,
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, even if, I mean, say, like, you have a dialogue of a teacher talking to or a parent talking to a teacher, and if you have a dialogue printed out and you could read that,
that would be perfect.
that would be like a good thing for to have her
Additional
read.
reinforcement.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.